Commissioner Moeller,
Here.
Commissioner Painter,
Here.
Commissioner Ramos,
Here.
Chair Cottrell.
Here. Thank you. And could I ask Councilmember Lopez Ortega to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? All right, we'll move to item number 3, approval of agenda. Are there any questions or comments on last meeting's agenda?
No, but I'll make a motion to approve.
All right.
Second.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Mueller, second by Commissioner Leary. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No oppositions. Motion carries. Are there any public comments this morning? And Dawn, we're doing this all in person, correct? So we don't have any remote options for?
No, in fact, no, there is, it's not remote. And then also we did check this morning, there were no comments submitted.
Great, thank you. All right, that will bring us to our consent items, number 5. And you know what? I misspoke about what item number 3 was about. It was about approving the agenda for today, not last month's minutes. So can we amend the record to make that clear?
Yes, Madam
Okay.
Chair, we will do that, absolutely.
Perfect.
That'll be reflected in the minutes.
Thank you. Thanks for fixing my error there. All right, so under consent items, we have 1 action item and then 2 receive report for information only. Is there any questions or comments or a motion?
No, I'll make a motion to approve today's consent items.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you. And that will bring us to item number 6, a special presentation on the Well Annual Conference. Good morning, council member.
Good morning.
Second.
This will? Can you hear me okay?
I don't think that microphone's on.
Let's see where. All right.
There you go.
Thank you. Good morning, commissioners. My name is Iris Lopez Ortega. I'm the vice mayor in Calistoga, and also I'm a board member for WELL, Water Education for Latino Leaders. And this morning, I just want to make a brief presentation about this organization. First, our mission. WELL educates and trains local Latino elected officials about California water policy to promote actions that serve to develop a robust economy, healthy communities, and a resilient environment for all California. Our history. In 2012, founder Victor Griego approached several California water professionals to discuss the need to educate Latino leaders about California water crisis. After that conversation, they recruited 8 others to help achieve the goal. These individuals made up the first advisor board of water education for Latino leaders. Today, the WELL Board of Directors is comprised of water experts and elected officials. These are a diverse set of leaders representing various constituencies and the diverse perspectives that come from their experience as leaders at national, state, and local water agencies. Their expertise includes water policy and water management, environmental justice, conservation initiatives, and community, political, and labor organizing. Here are some of the initiatives that we achieved. 12 statewide conferences with an average of 100 to 150 attendees at each event. Graduated 84 elected officials through the Well and Tap Fellowship, a selected 6 program that began in 2017 to help local elected leaders to make impact on California water policy while addressing their individual community water challenges. There are significant work that WELL has been doing with through the state. WELL wants to prepare the next generation of California water policy leaders. WELL involves the people who represent 40% of California population, but less than 2% of elected water officials, mostly the Latino community. WELL programs are targeted to local elected officials because they already have responsibility over water issues. There are significant challenges for California on the horizon, and one of them is their human right to water and how to manage limited water resources that have been impacted by climate change. WELL believes that Californians can rise to the occasion through education, engagement, and action. WELL is committed to developing local elected leaders who will change the state water policies. And for that reason, it's important to prepare them now. WELL strategic partners include the National Association of Latino Elected Officials, NALEO, the California League of Cities, the Latino, Asian Pacific Island, and African American caucuses of the California League of Cities, the California State Caucus, and the California Contract Cities Association. WELL has received funding for more than 80 entities, including labor unions, national environmental nonprofits, private foundations, private corporations, local government, water agencies like the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California and Santa Clara Valley Water District. WELL has created the program that is called UNTAP, the WELL UNTAP, which is a 6-month program selected for local elected leaders. Participants in that program will make an impact on California water policy while addressing individual community water changes. The UNTED program creates an opportunity for local leaders to engage with water issues through a comprehensive and active exploration of history, governance, public policy, geography, economics, and the relationship to human rights and climate change. The goal of the WELL UNTAP Fellowship is to give local elected officials a deeper understanding on the fundamentals of water policy and governance. The UNTAP sessions are held at different water locations through California, and sections include lectures given by water professionals and skill-based exercises that help participants to ask better public policy questions and strengthen public leadership and rational skills. This past March 15 and 16, we hold our 12th annual conference, and we did have different speakers that they focus on different challenges and questions that we had about water. For example, one of them is how can we incorporate principles equity into the design and upkeep of existing and upcoming water projects. We had different panels that, they explain us how they deal in their own communities with this type of issues. Also, we had a small group discussion about how can we do to build more water resilient communities and what state and local policy changes are needed to meet California's future water needs. So basically, this is what I want to share with you. So we are trying to do more outreach. We're trying to do to let more people know, especially in the northern California. We have many participants from the south and the central valleys, but the north of California is very behind about this type of education for our leaders. I graduated in the class of 2019, and I'm on the board of directors right now, and I hope is anybody who would like to participate in an oncoming class, which is going to start in May. If you can, you have I'm going to leave you my card, and you can reach out to me. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Are there any questions?
Sorry.
Commissioner Ramos.
Just to make a comment, I really appreciate you bringing the message of well here locally. I have many colleagues across the state that have participated, and this is actually on my to-do list to be a part of well. And I think the deadline is in a couple of weeks, so I think I need to submit here very soon. But you'll be hearing more from me. I definitely do see the value is in California, as many of our jurisdictions are now within a groundwater sustainability area, and having that opportunity to cross collaborate and share information with people who have it worse, I think is the real benefit.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
Anyone else? I had a couple. I appreciate what you said, Commissioner Ramos, and that's great to hear that you're looking at signing up. I noticed in your list of organizations you've worked with, I didn't hear the California State Association of Counties, which I know Commissioner Ramos is quite involved in. And I'm there on the Ag and Natural Resources Committee. So maybe the three of us can talk off, get some communication and connection there too.
that would be great.
There's a supervisor up in Humboldt who might be interested in the work that you're doing as well. So we can talk about that.
That
So
would be great. Actually, in this class that just graduated, we have one of the council members from Suisun City, the mayor actually, and then we had one council member from Fairfield. So the program is expanding. So I'm just hoping to get more participation for people, for leaders here in the north.
and then my final thought is to maybe turn to staff and ask about the next LAFCO conference, if there's a way that we could connect this message and Iris with, if there's going to be any kind of panel on water, I think Well's perspective would be great to have at the table there too.
That will be awesome. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Great question, and you read my mind. I was planning on mentioning that the LAFCO annual conference, which occurs every year in October, well, sometimes it's other months, but typically October, there is a call for presentations out right now, and any commissioner who would like to relay any ideas to LAFCO for their consideration for the program, please get that to me by the end of this week. I'll take on the well connection idea and submit that and follow up if there are any questions or needs for more information on that.
Terrific. Thank you.
And if you had any other questions, I had the information for Victor Griego. He's the president and he's the founder of the organization, and Paul Hernandez is the executive director of the organization. So I had more information if you want to reach out to me. Very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
for
Thanks for being
listening.
here.
Thank you.
All right, so that brings us to item number 7, public hearing items. And we have 2 public hearing items on the agenda for today. First, item 7A, appointment of alternate public member. I will turn that over to you, Brendan, to walk us through.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning. Good morning. Good morning to the members of the commission as well. This item, I'll keep it brief because we only have one candidate for the open position. But I will mention that staff did fully comply with all of the requirements of our local policy to initiate an open public recruitment for the alternate public member position. We have an expiring term for the incumbent. The term expires on May 6th. I believe it is this year. We will need to either appoint a member or reappoint the incumbent for a new 4-year term beginning May 6th, 2024 and going through May of 2028. We only have one candidate, as mentioned. We had one other candidate who withdrew their application. And so the incumbent, Eve Khan, is our lone candidate for this open position. Ms. Khan is out of the state at the moment. She is available if needed by phone. In addition, Commissioner Khan provided a comment letter, which is in your folders. And so if you'd like to read that, I don't believe it's necessary to read into the record here. I'll look to, Dawn is our pinch hitter doing clerk duties, and I might be misremembering, and maybe Gary can help. Do we need to read that into the record? Okay.
Great.
Okay, so with that, I'll just hand it back over to the commission. The recommendation is to follow the public hearing procedures, allow for public comment, and then make an appointment or reappointment. And now just, we do have a phone number set up in case someone calls in for public comments. I'm not sure how they would know where we're at with this item. I don't believe we're being live streamed, so probably not going to get any calls, but that is a possibility.
Great. So I will go ahead and open the public hearing, and we will check to see if we have any calls or other input at this point. Doesn't look like there's anyone in the room, so, but the public hearing is open.
Just jumping in to add an important detail here, that the appointment process, it involves the city and county members of the commission only. And that means the public member, Commissioner Leary, will not be voting on this item, but Commissioner Leary may participate in the discussion of the item.
Thank you for that clarification. And so it sounds like we don't have any public comment at this point. So we'll go ahead and close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission for discussion and a motion. Commissioner Painter.
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to reappoint Eve Khan as our alternate member.
All right. Any other discussion or comment? If not, I will ask for the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Yes. Commissioner,
Oh, yeah.
motion by Commissioner Painter, second by Commissioner Ramos. Great. And with that, the motion passes unanimously. Thanks, and welcome Eve back for another term. Great. All right, so that will bring us to item 7B, the review of the proposed budget for fiscal year 2024-2025 and the draft work program. And again, I will hand it over to Brendan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And on this one, I'll try to keep it relatively brief so that our budget committee can weigh in with some of their thoughts as well. So under state law, LAFCO is required to adopt what we call a proposed budget by May 1st each year, and then a final budget is adopted by June 15th. And so today, this item relates to a proposed budget. Each year, the commission appoints an ad hoc subcommittee to work with staff on the budget, as well as the Commission's fee schedule and work program. Our current budget committee is comprised of Commissioners Leary and Moeller, and I will be relying on our budget committee, as mentioned, to add some detail really related to why is this budget so different from past years. And so what you'll immediately notice is that the budgeted revenues and expenses total about $913,000 and $362 actually, to be exact. And so those numbers match. We want to have a nice zero at the bottom so that we are not budgeting a deficit or a surplus for that matter. And that number is quite a bit higher as compared to recent years. The reason for that really relates to the Commission's adopted strategic plan, which calls for greater independence as one of the priority goals. And if we are going to achieve greater independence, we need to budget for it now. We need to be prepared. And so that's what we are doing. We're planning for every possible service that we may need as part of going more independent. That involves numerous meetings that staff held with private firms and even a JPA we met with that provide various services that are currently covered by our support services agreement with the county. But we wanted to be sure we really covered every base, and we have estimates provided to us by these firms and the JPA for what would their upfront costs be to get us started, plus the ongoing costs into the future if we do choose to enter into agreements with them. So the budget really, it incorporates, it's everything that we would need as staff and as a full organization. And so also tied to this would be a bit of an extra burden on our legal counsel to help us with the transition if we do go that direction. And so we've budgeted a higher amount for legal counsel to do things like preparing a personnel handbook, helping with human resources procedures, and quite a bit more that we would likely be leaning on counsel for that we don't currently need. And so in addition to that, other highlights are that we've budgeted $45,000 under consulting services, which just wanted to explain why do we have that number there. That is the remainder of our consultant contract with AP Triton to prepare the countywide fire and emergency medical services MSR. And next note that I want to cover before I turn it over to the ad hoc committee is reserves. So right now we have fairly healthy reserves. We have a local policy that directs the commission to maintain a minimum amount of reserves that equals at least a third of our budgeted expenses. And so because the proposed budget has higher budgeted expenses than previous years, that has an effect on our reserves as well, our target under the policy. So we have to be careful about that, make sure that we're not falling under that 1/3 threshold. And the proposed budget in front of you accomplishes that. And so hypothetically, let's just say the commission does adopt this proposed budget today and we end up not changing anything at all about our organizational structure. What would happen is the excess that we budgeted for will end up in our reserves, and then we will use those reserves in future years to offset future agency contributions, and also use some of that for special projects. For example, the countywide fire and EMS MSR, that requires a consultant to help us, and so important to have something in reserves for when we have a major project like that one. The final note I'll mention is that so our budgeted revenues come from primarily agency contributions, with half of those coming from the county and half coming from the cities and the town. There's a small percentage of our revenues that come from application fees as well, for things like annexation proposals or sphere of influence amendments. We also have we earn interest on our invested reserves, and so the higher the reserves, the higher our interest revenue will be. And then finally, we will receive $4,000 from LAFCO for our assistant executive officer is currently the deputy executive officer for LAFCO, representing the coastal region. So we get a nice little stipend there as well. So I think that covers just about everything. Oh, actually, I'm going to stop myself because we do have one other item just quickly, the work program. You have a draft work program as attachment 4, I believe it is. That is attempting to forecast the studies we'll be working on this fiscal year. We have some major studies underway with Napa Sanitation District. We've actually been working on that for quite some time, but still don't anticipate a draft report coming forward for several more months. There's some major issues to work out there and see what we'll ultimately be studying. Also, we have added the City of St. Helena Municipal Service Review and Sphere Review for possible presentation in June of 2025. That's a report that it's really time that we just start working on that rather than wait for the perfect time when everybody from the city and LAFCO is all ready for it. It's been 16 years since their last review, so we need to do it. So with that, I will hand things over to our budget committee. Hope I didn't take all of your talking points.
Okay. So this year's, what staff kind of mentioned when we were going through this year's budget, Ken and I think we've been on the budget committee at least for the last 3 years or more for a while. And so, in past budgets, it's been a little more, I don't know if I want to call it routine, but we've probably spent more time in the past really trying to, figure out how to, get enough in reserve so when we have big projects. So that's really been the majority of what we talked about in the past. But this year's budget was a little different. And it's really been we felt a very critical task that really required a lot more kind of planning, strategic decision making, and how we were really going to be forecasting, because we really wanted to be proactive this year rather than reactive in the middle of the year as things kind of progressed towards taking our Napa County LAFCO independent. And, that is a major priority of our strategic plan. So we gave that a lot of priority as we were thinking through this. And it's very interesting by looking at all the elements and the funds and all the in the budget, it's really an amazing roadmap, if you will, of what we have to do to become independent, and really what the financial aspects of all that are. And it was really helpful that the staff, they have been working a lot, looking at going independent, talking, coming up with, I like forecasting rather than best guess, but it's really a best guess at this point. So as we, so some of the things, you can kind of see in the budget, and we have accounting, auditing, payroll, salary adjustments, a lot of other things. So that was really kind of our roadmap. So we really wanted to make sure that we had adequate funding in this year's budget, so that hopefully by the end of this year's budget, we will be all done with this process. And so with this forecasting, it really is a proposed budget. And, once we go through this process of going independent, the actuals will kind of tell us the real story, so we can make. So I think, next year's budget is going to be interesting too, depending on what the actuals really kind of turn out to be. So I will, Ken, you want to add anything?
Thank you, Margie. This year working on the budget was definitely different. It was actually exciting for me. if we ever do a report or apply for an award in terms of going independent, I think it should start with the budget. I mean, we met numerous times on this, had numerous conversations, but then looking at it through the budget and through finance really made it clear. And basically, if going independent, it's going to cost. And I think we all agree that going independent is the best way to go. I think we'll be able to do a much stronger, better job. And not only that, I think one of the things it says when the fair political, if it looks and appears as if there is a conflict or something else, then stay away from it. I think being independent sends a message of how we look, how we show up. And I think that's important. So for me, independence, and I think we all agreed as commissioners that this is what we wanted to do. So this is a budget that reflects that. It's going to cost, and I believe these costs are worthwhile. So thank you.
First of all, thanks to the budget subcommittee for working on this and staff for working on this too. I have some questions. I want to turn it to my fellow commissioners and hear from you folks as well, if you would like to add things.
Perhaps, but why don't you go ahead and start,
Okay.
if you don't mind.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, I think, and I went back to look at our strategic plan to understand how we had phrased the independence item, and what we have is amend the agreement between LAFCO and the county to create greater independence. And again, as a relatively new commissioner, I'm coming on board and understanding the many benefits of being independent. And I do think we need to have more conversations as a group about what the elements of that look like. I mean, at the end of the day, the county and the municipalities are funding the operations of LAFCO, whether we're have some fiscal operations done by the county or whether we bring all those in-house and then contract them out. So I guess as I'm looking at this budget and I'm seeing, and I appreciate what you guys are doing, which is to say, if we go down this path, we need these funds in place to do this. And I think where I am at the moment is to say, I'm still trying to understand what the path is and what are the elements needed. And I know that for all of us, we have to go back to our respective jurisdictions and say, hey, here's the budget and here's why. And as you point out, it's a big jump. And I don't feel like at this moment I have all the information I need to explain why this is the best path for LAFCO. So I'm not sure where that puts us. I think one of my questions is if we choose to take, I think this question, and again, the reason I went back to the strategic plan is greater independence has a range of options. And so what all those look like and this is an interesting moment where the budget discussion is getting overlaid with our substantive discussion, and it's messy, right? So how do we kind of carve out what our options are, how we make a decision here, because we need to move forward and provide a proposed budget at the same time as we don't short circuit the real conversations we need to have about what the goals of independence would be. So with that, that's just kind of my first read into this. I did have.
And can I just make one quick
yeah,
comment? So as Ken mentioned, and going through this and trying to be proactive, yes, it is a higher budget, but as I mentioned too, we're not going to really know until our actuals come in, because it's going to be a bit of a balance. We're kind of coming up with probably a bit of, as I said, guesswork in this. But on the other hand, once we kind of move through it, to your point of what are all the elements and et cetera, then there will also be cost savings, because then some funds aren't, going to county for those services. So that's really where the best estimates, guesstimates really are kind of coming in. So it's a possibility that, even with this proposed budget, that's why I also mentioned next year, it could be like, oh, let's just say it's possible we overestimated. Well, then things will change in terms of, dues and things like that next year. So it's a bit of just a balancing act right now. So just to kind of add that, just in case you didn't kind of.
Thank you. Yeah, no,
A
that's
bell went off in my head when I was like, okay, well, we have to do this now, but what's that going to mean for next year? It's like, well, we just have to wait till, and maybe we can really look mid-year, depending on how many elements we kind of get through during the year for, even a mid-year where we are. So
the other thing. This gets into the weeds a little bit, but I want to make this comment and then turn it over to any colleagues who have questions. When I'm looking at the reserve, we usually base a reserve based on how much risk is out there for an organization and depending on their sources of funding. As we're looking at it here and you point out, most of our funding is from the contributing agencies, which is pretty low risk. It's pretty strong likelihood that those funds will be coming in. So there's an argument that a 4-month reserve is high. So another way we could kind of help prepare for this time when we don't have specific numbers is to pull more of that or put more of that uncertainty on the shoulders of our reserve. So that might be a way to bring that overall budget number down, understanding that there's going to be some shifts. But that's a little bit in the weeds. Commissioner Painter, Commissioner Ramos, do you guys have Commissioner Painter?
Sorry. I'll start with a question. Looking at the administration services line for FY 23-24, we budgeted 535. The actual was 559. We're now proposing 667, and I did look at the list of items that generally go into that. Is a part of that cost, which is really our biggest cost, is a part of that cost services that we pay for to the county?
No, we're not paying anything to the county out of that. This is really just staff salaries, benefits. That's really all that's covered in there.
Okay, so then that leads to my next question is looking at 23-24, which line item then, if we're looking at IT, which was 34,000, and we're looking at accounting auditing that was 7,500, those are the categories, and then also there was one other category, I believe. Just if you could highlight for me those items where we would have to shift from what we pay for services that the county provides to other services.
Absolutely. Good questions, Commissioner Painter. I'll start with we'll go with IT first. We'll go accounting since it's higher on the list here. So accounting and auditing services, currently we have all of those services provided by the county. We are looking at having an independent firm or a bookkeeper do our internal financial management and reporting needs, and then we would have a separate auditor since they can't be the same firm. And we're going with some estimates we've received. I will mention that this 20,000 number is likely on the high side. We most recently had a successful meeting with a bookkeeper just last week. It was too late to update all of this, the budget sheet, and update the staff report, but it does sound like we can drive that number down quite a bit. The 20,000 was based on a couple of meetings with other firms that were on the high side and tailored for a larger organization that wants things like monthly financial reports to their boards. We don't need quite that level of detail. So we may be looking at dropping that number for the final budget. Not sure yet what that looks like. And then IT, the number that you see, 27,746, that is actually, that's the exact charge from the county for the county to continue providing IT services. And the reason I kept that number in is we had a very promising meeting with a local computer firm called Computer Engineering Group, and they promised that they could beat our current rate, what we pay now. However, we don't have an exact number to work with, and I felt it was the more appropriate path to just put in the full amount of what we pay now. Things typically seem to they rise in price as you continue the conversation sometimes, and so also we would need to purchase our own computers if we go independent. Right now, we just are essentially borrowing county equipment. So, and that the computer cost is actually embedded down below under computer equipment / accessories. So we put $5,000 towards that in that line item, where the current fiscal year is only $571. So hope that answered your questions.
Yeah, I think it does, and it kind of leads me to trying to figure out how we continue on this path towards determining what the right structure is of independence and what that means. You've created then a couple of, or increased a few specific line items: computer equipment, computer software, and I'm thinking of all of our cities in the county looking at this budget to understand, what direction we're going and make sure that we're, on that clear path. And this is just brainstorming. I don't even know if this is a good idea, but I'm wondering if it might be more transparent and more informative to create a different line item for independent services, keeping the IT, keeping the other numbers as is, so that we have that money to use to say, and to keep on our path to understand, what this all means, rather than just automatically change these numbers pretty significantly. I don't know if that helps try to explain to the public, to the county, to all the cities, what path we're on. But it's just an idea where maybe the bottom line doesn't change. In terms of the reserve funds, I also look at that as an opportunity when we have a project that comes in, that we have that money there. So to me, it's not just the 3 months of operating, it's also, that we have an opportunity to pull money if we need to for a particular project. We all may have one in mind. I do, but I won't mention that now because we're talking about the budget. So that, I don't know if that helps try to make the budget tell a better story.
And just to kind of address that a little bit, we spent quite a bit of time talking about where does this, these increases go, et cetera. And one of the things that we've been challenged with is right now we are under the obligations to follow the structure of a budget based on the county structure. So some of that flexibility that's like, let's do this or let's do that, was like, well, we got to go back to the county and figure that out. And it's like, now we're doing the budget. So that got kind of factored in exactly, when we were trying to decide where to put all that. And so I don't really know if we know the answer, if we can really create another line, but we just decided let's stay within the current system so we don't find out later that it gets rejected or we couldn't do that, much like, we've kind of done in the past with reserves. Also, the county does have a reserve policy that we have to follow right now because we're all part of the county system when it comes to budgeting. Is that a 3 months operating?
Unfortunately, I'm not prepared to speak on the county's policy on reserves. I don't have it crystal clear in my mind.
Yeah. So anyway, so I think I think we could probably use some of that, but as I mentioned, I don't have it in my head. At one time I thought I knew it, but I don't. And so we'd really probably have to kind of go back and look at that so we wouldn't fall below it and then cause kind of another problem. So it's all part of this kind of untangling from the county and a lot of guesswork. So any thoughts? Definitely open.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, the constraints that you're working within, so that makes a lot of sense to me. Maybe the other option is that because we're thinking about some pretty significant changes, that we have quarterly updates on our budget and have opportunities. As you said, budgets are there for a framework. We can adjust a budget. And we know that we probably will need to, particularly this year, because of and thank you, first of all, for all the work you put into this to try to thread this needle. So maybe the answer is to just revisit it more regularly so that we can, if we decide we need to make adjustments based on more information that we're learning, we can do that.
And I would imagine it's very likely that some numbers are going to come in lower and some are going to come in higher. And so I completely agree with that.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I heard what you said. Both of you really basically are talking about telling that story and the why and the path, and I hear that. So the question is then how do we tell that story? There are restraints in terms of where we can put money because of the system. However, each budgets have narratives. Some cities and places win awards based on that. So I think that's going to be something important to be able to develop that narrative, to tell the story in terms of why we believe that going independence will be better for the cities and the county and all the parties engaged. So I just want to let you know that I hear you. Okay.
Commissioner Ramos.
Thank you. I do have many thoughts. First, thank you to the Budget Committee. As I'm just on the heels of having presented a $13 million budget last week to CSAC, I definitely know the amount of work that goes into it. So I'm going to start first with, I'll go through just kind of bigger stuff, and then I have some specific concerns line items wise. For the budget reserve policy, it is not a county recommendation at 4 months. That is, from a county perspective, that is an incredibly high amount. We'd have no money to move around and to do our services. That actually comes from our own budget policy, which was last updated in November of 2019, Budget Policy 3D. Preparation of annual budget. The budget shall include an undesignated unreserved fund balance equal to minimum of 1/3 4 months of annually budgeted operating expenses. That's an internally adopted policy. I think that given that all our money is coming from other jurisdictions, we need to be really cognizant of reflecting on this. And I personally would like to just refer this over to the executive director for review at a later point to have our budget policies be far more in line with the jurisdictions that we serve. And I see that being more of a 10, maybe 15%, but that's on an unrestricted budget reserve policy. We also have the option to look at restricted reserve policies if we have special projects, but we don't have that within this budget. So that comes from our own budget policy. I would love for us to actually review those policies, especially as we are, and I'll just put this as an aside and get back to budget, especially as we are looking at undertaking something completely different than what we're doing right now. The starting point should be our budget policy, our policies for the organization and our budget policies to see how they are serving us or not serving us as we're looking at other things. So now I'm not a master at all these open windows. Hold on. Okay, here it is. Going to the actual budget, and I have questions, and I'll start line by line. So on the, I'm looking at the narrative of when it comes to administrative services. This is the account 52100. So one of the things that I see in here in the second bullet point, it says staff salaries previously approved by LAFCO, and it says salaries. So my understanding was we were only dealing with one salary that was approved. So I'm questioning, why are there multiple in here? What am I forgetting?
So Commissioner Ramos, good question. The assistant executive officer had a salary that was approved by way of approving a past budget. That was 2 years ago, I believe. The details are getting a bit fuzzy, but Dawn can jump in and correct me if I'm misspeaking. I believe it was 2 years ago the commission approved a budget with a higher salary for Dawn, and then there was an issue there where it couldn't be implemented because it was a bit complicated. I can't restate it now. And then last year, I believe we budgeted a lower amount for Dawn to be in line with what's actually possible. And then so we're proposing that we put back the higher amount that we had agreed to before. So that's the second salary there.
Okay, I'm going to just put a pin in this one because I think this is, we're going to need to really refer this to council in closed session. Again, because we're dealing with county employees, we don't have a back pay policy at the county. We only ever look forward. So I'm questioning the fact that this is included in here because that cannot be brought to fruition within our county policies. So I would be very interested in knowing what that amount is that is allocated for back pay and removing that from the budget entirely, because we shouldn't be charging our respective agencies for this amount that we cannot bring into fruition. The next part, when I go to the actual line items, I'm attempting to do math. And on a Monday, that's not always great. So when I look at the estimate of last year, 23-24, and the adjusted, can you, on 23-24, can you explain to me that $25,000 difference on administrative services line?
So the adjusted budget versus the estimate, is that?
Yes.
That is based on, I have to rack my brain on this one. What was the difference there? That was, I apologize. It's not immediately coming to me, but if you'd like, I can look into the budget sheet, which has more detail. I can try to open that and see what I can find.
So I guess my concern here is when I look at, let's say, estimated, and I get it. We all go through mid-year budget adjustments. I think last year we hit a phenomenal record of like 23 or something. It happens. But within our limited scope here of LAFCO, one of the things that I see here, if we look at our estimate of last year and compare it to this year's proposed, on administrative services alone, that's a 25% increase. I'm having a hard time with that. When I look at, if this is employees, why is this year's proposed budget a 25% increase over last year's estimated? What has changed?
Well, one thing that's changed is the salary amounts for all three staff, which also includes a step increase for the clerk/junior analyst. Also, we had realized we were inadvertently under budgeting for certain retirement benefits. We had the wrong factor that is feeding into the amount we were actually paying. We had too low of a number in there, and it's based on salary. And so that's a double hit because the salaries go up. That'll increase our retirement contributions as well. Also, the factor itself, the percentage factor went up. That increases it as well. We have a slew of other items like Medicare also was another one that we caught, had lower factors. They were under budgeted in part. We've had so much staff transition over the last couple of years, and that's affected some of this as well. We had the last couple of years, we were guessing who we would have at staff and at what levels, and now we know we have 3 full-time employees, and we have a bit more certainty on the salaries. So not sure how to go into too much more detail right now, but certainly I can sense there's a need to dig deeper and look at some of the more specific numbers under the hood on some of this. So certainly staff is open to any direction the commission has to follow up on this, whatever that may look like. And the budget committee, I'm going to look to them as well to speak up if appropriate.
I definitely do think that on administrative services, just, when we look at, we are all contributors to this bill. And in 3 years, administrative services have gone up 51%. If my administrative services had gone up at the county at 51%, we'd be shut down. That's not sustainable. And so I know we've had a growth and a change in the level of staffing, but when I see a number that is growing in this amount, it gives me pause. Staffing is always going to be our largest expenditure, but as it is proposed, staffing is most of the budget. We only have about $235,000 in other expenses, and the rest is all admin. So I want us to look at that. I also want to make sure that the number is not incorporating any back pay, as that's just not a policy that the county would do. So that's not something that we should account for. The other part that I agree with Commissioner Painter that it would be if we are in fact going to start looking at independent services, I think we need to start looking at how we account for that in the budget. Perhaps I am hesitant on saying designated on a reserve. You never want to, because you tie your hands, because then you don't use it for that. You have to return it to the contributing agency. So I'm very, very hesitant on wanting to call it a designated, but I think that we do need to start looking at the opportunity for that. And the reserve part, I go back to, I think we really need to look at our policy. County's policy is a 10%, and we do just fine with that. And we pay all our dues up front, right? So we're money rich at the beginning of the fiscal year. Is that right?
That's right.
So if we're already sitting with a 10% in July, money comes in, we get a new 10%, right? So I think we need to start looking at adjusting that percentage on our reserves, and maybe that's a conversation starter with our respective jurisdictions to say the difference in our current reserves becomes our Independence Project money, right? Maybe that's a way to deal, say we're not going to return it to you, right? That's policy-wise what we can look at, but I think we need to be more mindful of this budget overall. It just seems like it's a really big increase from where we've been.
So can I follow up?
Then I want to go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't see you over there, Joelle. You want to go?
Thank you. So first of all, I just wanted to say that the work plan basically drives the budget. The strategic plan is driving the work plan. So if the goal, the agreed upon goal was to go independent, I don't know. I'm a little confused with this becoming more independent, because to me, it's one or the other. There really isn't like some independence. I mean, the idea of independence is to make it clear to the community and the jurisdictions that LAFCO is an independent agency that makes its decisions based on, LAFCO policy, et cetera, and that we come together as representatives for LAFCO, not from our different jurisdictions. So we wear the LAFCO hat, and I think it is worthy of us going independent because we want to be seen as such and not controlled by any particular jurisdiction or entity. And I think when we have this really close entangled relationship with the county, it looks like a control by the county kind of thing. So I think that's very messy. I think you can see how messy it is just by the discussion today, why that entanglement, it makes it very difficult. And I think it makes it difficult for staff and sometimes even maybe the commissioners making recommendations as LAFCO and not feeling that, well, really we're under the county. Because really that's not fair to the other jurisdictions. We're not. We are supposed to be independent. So I'm just thinking about the work plan actually driving the budget. And if we're moving toward this independence, then we do have to budget for the services that we would be moving essentially from the county to outside services. So I think there's probably different ways to handle it. One way would be to I think assuring that those particular services are accounted for in the relevant line items is important. And then you create a footnote. I mean, you can have some large footnotes, to Ken's point about the narrative. I mean, you can pretty much, explain every line item in a separate note or a footnote. I think probably what would help with the administrative services line is that should be accompanied by a separate spreadsheet that actually delineates what all of those different administrative services are that make up that number, because that is a really, really large number. When you look at the other line items, that's the largest one. So it should have its own separate sheet that we can review, that the public can review, that the jurisdictions can review. So it's really, really clear what that number is. To Commissioner Ramos's point, it's a huge increase, but what exactly is in there? What is that? Because that is probably made up of many, many sub-line items, if you will. So I think maybe that would help to create that. I agree that, looking at the reserve policy is really important. It really is a really high reserve, and I don't know that that's necessary. I wanted to ask a couple quick questions about the work plan involves MSR and SOI for review for County Services Area Number 4 and Napa-San SOI review. Are those things that would require consultants? Because if so, it doesn't look like we budgeted for the consultants. It looks like we budgeted for the remainder of the AP Triton consulting contract. So are those things done without consultants, I guess is what my question is.
That is correct, Commissioner Gallagher.
Okay.
So the studies that show up in the work program would be in-house, except for the countywide fire and EMS. And that could be spelled out better, and I'll make a note of that.
Okay. Well, no, thank you. That makes sense. I just wanted to be sure. And then the other question I had was, and this gets into a whole different discussion, but just briefly, maybe you could say, how do our fees compare to other LAFCOs around the state?
Excellent question that hasn't been looked at locally in several years. I think it's been close to a decade since we took a close look. I recall we did this when Keen Simons was the executive officer here. So that's
a while ago.
That's a lifetime ago, and we found we were a really good deal with low fees then, but we've bumped them up, and now our fee schedule is based on a fully burdened hourly rate, and and that considers all of our budgeted expenses. So we would be looking at a pretty sizable increase to our fees coming out of the proposed budget before the commission today.
Okay, I was just curious because if we haven't done a, look at that, we probably are due to do that. But I think that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
So I'll go ahead and thank you very much for going first, because I totally agree. A couple things I wanted to address is first to Commissioner Ramos's question about it's a bit of a conundrum about to not have a back pay policy because the county doesn't, but now we're really kind of going independent, and so a lot of these the admin costs, which I thought Commissioner Gallagher brought up a good point, we can certainly break those out in more detail, and I think that would be valuable as well. But some of the I think early drivers of really pushing us to what all the other LAFCOs are doing by going independent was a little bit of our difficulty, frustration with the county about being able to pay our staff. And because the county has the county system for the majority of the employees, so they have their titles, they have all their steps, we just didn't fit. And so we couldn't really kind of squeeze in and say, can you make one for us? So we've been, we have approved, what we were going to bring, new staff members in. And for a long time, we were down a whole staff member. And because of that, we had a lot of consulting fees, which we don't have anymore because we're bringing so much more in because we do have staff now to do it. So that has to kind of get weighed. Yes, this is a little higher now, but that whole line item with consultants has really changed. So I think you really have to look at those two things a bit in tandem. So, and we were all kind of surprised. We gave, Brendan his review. We had, an ad hoc, that made a recommendation to this board. That money was never spent because we couldn't spend it because of that structure we were working with in the county. So it's a bit of a conundrum. It's like, when are we really going to move forward with our independence? That's why, we've got this proposal right now, because we don't know which boxes we're going to be able to check off. So we're not going to be doing back pay until we really have the authority to kind of do that ourselves, because right now it's sitting there as a placeholder. But, it's money that we owed, and I think it's fair since we approved this, not it's like, oh, we're just wiping that off the books. I think that's a whole nother conversation. And just to the reserve policy, Yountville has 35%. So I appreciate what the county has, but I know you've got, I don't know if it's all relative, but you have an enormously higher amount of, it's 35% of operating revenues, just to be exact. So it's, we have a very low budget. It's probably like, it's still less than $1 million. So those numbers, I think we need to kind of think about that, a little bit. And, even having an independent line item for special projects. What was it, 2 years ago? We tried that. Well, county said, nope, can't do that. So that, the only thing that we were kind of allowed was this contingency. And I think it really was, as I recall, it is like a 3-month is what they recommend, is kind of what I have in my head. So all these things, they're all kind of tangled together a bit. And, but, I definitely have a different opinion about canceling back pay. It's just a matter of time before, we have to pay our staff what we all agreed to do. It's not just because, well, we don't have a policy for that, it's gone. So anyway, I definitely share a different opinion there. So those are my comments for now.
All right, thank you. So let me see if I could at least kind of benchmark where we are right now. I think this is a very substantive discussion. Thank you both again for your work on this as the budget subcommittee, and thank you, Brendan, for all your work and helping us understand it a little bit more. So, I think I have a couple, 4 or 5 points here. I think one of the issues we're looking at is not only this is a new effort, right? And a change from how budgets for LAFCO have been done in the past. So that takes a little bit more for us to wrap our head around. Also, we have some, what I think we should call kind of unsettled business, because as a commission, we approved some pay increases. You know, in all honesty, I think I don't feel like I understood at that moment that our de facto budget policies, because we're working with the county, did not allow us to do that. So that is a challenging situation we're in, and I think we should call that out as something, you know, even separate from this budget discussion about how we talk about that, and appreciate the views on back pay, things like that. I will say, you know, whether or not that's something that I want to support or not support, if I'm, you know, as part of the county helping to approve our contribution, if that contribution includes money that goes toward back pay, I think that can get problematic too. So I think we should continue to think about how we discuss that. Joelle, I loved your term entanglement, because I think that's what one of the challenges we're facing now is just how LAFCO, you know, whether we go independent fully or not. And I will say, I think I have a slightly different point of view, that there are ways that we could break off pieces and not the whole thing, trying to understand what that might look like. I don't have that right now. But the fact that we are in a moment where we are not fully independent, which flavor of independence we get to is a discussion we need to have. But given that we are not that now, how do we move forward with a budget and something that we can get done in time? So I guess given that kind of frame, and Brendan, I appreciate what you said, that you're open to our suggestions or requests, but I think I would turn it back to you and say, given that you hear a lot of discussion and some more questions, but also where do you see us going? It sounds like we're not ready to approve this today. What are some of the options we could be looking at?
Oh, thank you. Great summary, Madam Chair, and good question about what are the options. I would say, first, we have the state mandate that we must adopt a proposed budget by May 1st. So our options, if we are to change what is before us today, I'll look to council to see if this is allowed. We can agree to revise numbers and put it into the record, and the draft materials would not be accurate. We would have to follow up on that, and there would be a revised resolution for the chair's review and signature after this meeting, and we'd have to be sure we got everything absolutely perfect based on our discussion. Another option is to schedule a special meeting sometime before May 1st and have the budget committee put their heads together with staff, and we can take everything that has been shared today and work on a revised budget to bring to that special meeting. Any other options that legal counsel might be able to come up with?
I do think those are the two options. I'll just add that I don't think the resolution would need any revisions if you were to change the budget. The exhibit is all the line items that you all have been discussing during this meeting. So to the extent you all can agree and there's enough information to give input on changing those numbers, you could theoretically change that number as part of your motion and then still adopt the resolution at today's meeting. Short of that, I do think it is a special meeting to get it done before the May 1st deadline.
Okay, thank you for setting out those two options. I think a special meeting is challenging to schedule, but I think that gives staff and our budget subcommittee and the entire commission the chance to have another deep dive into this and be able to see what kind of responsive document could come out. So I'm looking to my colleagues to see if that something like that plan would the budget subcommittee be willing to meet again and work with staff on this?
I think since there's only two of us, we're probably more flexible than getting the five of us together. So it would be, I think before we leave this meeting, since everybody's here, they have their calendars, let's pick a time for a special meeting. To me, that's one of the harder things to do. and then we'll go back into figuring which of these line items you want, what I'm here, really broken out, so we can have sub-items to really talk about later.
Sounds good. So it sounds like you're willing to meet in the interim, and you support the idea of a follow-up special meeting. Commissioner Painter, did you have a comment?
I just have one comment, and first of all, yeah, we none of us love extra meetings, but I think it really warrants some additional time. I would like to be really clear for both staff and for the committee on exactly what we're looking for, because I think that's going to help your conversations, the things that, and everybody can add to this list, but I think we want to see a separate spreadsheet for the admin services broken out so that at that meeting, we can decide which items on the menu we want to order. Number two, I really like the idea of the footnotes to explain line items, because I think that helps us adopt a budget that has that story built into it. And if others want to add to that list, those were my two first big ones.
Thank you. I have a recommendation for staff and to the Budget Committee. If you look at Sonoma County's LAFCO adopted budget on their expenditures for salaries and benefits, they take it down to earnings, cash allowance, boards, commissions, county retirement, FICA, health insurance, everything. It's a nice spreadsheet down to dental insurance, life insurance, PERS payments. It's all in there, all line items broken out. So I think Sonoma County LAFCO has a really good portion. They also include the number of FTEs and their job description within that schedule. So I think, again, that helps to tell the story. And it can even say, include when that change of staffing went from 2 to 3. I think that's incredibly important, so that there's a correlation of where the shift in expenditures are. And they also have the breaking down on services and a bit more services and supplies, a bit more detailed, which would I certainly would welcome it. And then I would also, my personal, just throwing it out there for discussion, I would like to see the reserve brought down to the policy level and use of reserve against the budget at a proportionate share to each of the jurisdictions. I think getting in line with the reserve policy makes sense, and then we can at a later time, revisit those policies, which are now 5 years old, and the fee structure as it moves around. But I think that's nothing that we do here at LAFCO is unpredictable. Like, we don't just one day be like, oh, we have to do this emergency, MSR review. Nothing. That's the whole nature of LAFCO, to be predictable. So it's not like we're going to have a declared emergency that LAFCO has emergency expenses for. So I just want us to be mindful of really what our reserves mean to us as this organization as opposed to a municipality.
All right.
And
Thank you.
If I could just jump in on that for some additional information. The budget policy, which was last amended on November 18th, 2019, which is 9 of 18 in the agenda packet materials for this item, that's what contains your reserve amount. So revising that would require an amendment to that policy.
Yes, but I'm not saying doing that now.
I just want to be clear on what you're proposing.
Yes,
okay, go ahead.
I'm doing that, throwing it out as a future agenda item, that I do think that we need to incorporate the suggestion of Supervisor Gallagher to look at the contributing percentage of each jurisdiction, also to revise the budget policies, because 5 years it's 5 years. But until such time, to draw down on the reserve to the budget policy and then use that amount for budget for operating for this year.
So I have a question for staff, because I know, again, kind of back to, we're still in the county system. Do you get the breakdown in terms of down to how much your dental insurance is costing from the county, or do they give you a number? And do we have time? I know, because we've had lots of conversations about this, that some of that process is very slow. So, and we're going to have a pretty short window here to our special meeting. Is that the kind of detail you can get?
Yes, thank you for the question, Commissioner Moeller. We have all of that already. It's the county has a budget site built in to what they call SharePoint. I have accessed all of those numbers. This year was actually the first year I discovered we had been under budgeting certain percentage factors, and so that's been fixed. And that all feeds in. There are sub sheets within our budget sheet that all feed in to the master sheet, and so that will not take any extra work to find those numbers since they're in there. So
It might just take a paper copy of a more detailed budget. Probably you might want to think about that too, than what we can maybe view on an iPad, because it really is going to be a lot more detail. So just something to kind of think about.
Alternate Member Gallagher, did you have pieces that you want to add to the list that we've got thus far?
I think that the list that you have so far covers everything that I had spoken about too.
Great. Okay. Commissioner Mueller or Leary, were there other things you wanted to add to the list, or?
Actually, I was. Can we go through that list one more time, just so we don't spend a lot of
Sure.
our budget time making
Brendan, do you
sure?
want to read off what you've got down thus
absolutely,
far?
Okay.
yes, happy to do that. So the admin services line item will have a separate sheet that drills down, shows the specific numbers in each of the funds within that. We will add footnotes to the budget sheet to explain line items and to tell the story. We will be also looking at Sonoma LAFCO's budget, which drills down quite a bit more, and use that as a guide. We will look at bringing down the reserves to the policy level. And now I could use a bit of clarification on the next piece there. So we'll use, so that excess reserve amount that we'll have left over, we'll use that basically to offset the agency contributions, is how I understood it. Or no, sorry. I
No,
misunderstood.
I'm now reviewing my words in my head, and that was terrible because the percentage is carried forward on everything anyways. So just
Right.
use it for the operating budget.
That is how you described it, Commissioner Ramos. I somehow got twisted in my thoughts. So, and then we'll be reviewing the budget policy at a future meeting. The budget committee can certainly take a look at that. Curious what the commission thinks. Should the budget committee be looking at that policy, or should that be a separate budget committee, or just an agenda item for the entire commission to look at together and then decide what to do? Would be helpful to get direction.
I was going to say, I like the idea of it being initially looked at by the budget subcommittee and then presented for a larger discussion. That seems like a reasonable direction. Commissioner Leary and then Commissioner Painter. You're good? Okay, thanks.
I just want to, not to add to the list, but just to be clear, I think one of the challenges we've had in the past is how to set aside money for consultant services for reports that we think are going to be really important that our limited staff cannot do. So somehow, I really think we need to figure out a way to maybe reduce our reserves, but find a way to create a line item for these future projects. We have some really great work coming up, and I think that's where, in addition to the, figuring out how we navigate through this path to whatever independence is, how do we start a fund for those future projects? And if it's been a challenge within the county's framework, then let's talk about ways to do it, because I think that's a huge part of what is important in terms of our work as LAFCO.
I couldn't agree with you more. In the past budget committees, this has probably been the single biggest frustration, is exactly for that. How do we do that? And that's all working through the county. The only thing we could do was do with the contingency, because they just have a minimum. So we could possibly do that again, Joelle.
Joelle.
I think that we did this last year because we basically put the money in the consulting line item. That's how we took care of it. There's really no reason. I mean, I think as Commissioner Ramos said, there's nothing, we're not going to do something that we don't know we're going to do, right? We're not going to, in the same budget year, we're probably not going to say, well, let's do this report. You know, that would be for the following year, correct? So we would know what the work is ahead of time and be able to budget for it. And basically you just put it in the consultant line item, wouldn't you?
Commissioner Ramos.
Yes, and I think the other part is let's not forget the opportunities that we have for a mid-year budget adjustment. If in fact we decide to do something, this is exactly what reserves are for. Take it out of your reserves, do a mid-year budget adjustment, and then if we need a true-up, we need a true-up. Our hands aren't being tied here, you know, of the inability to plan by the county. Yes, you can't, it's an intergovernmental fund and you can't just create all sorts of line items into it, but we can utilize mid-year budget adjustments. If in fact we have a payment that needs to get advanced, we use the mid-year budget adjustment. This is not a one and done. Like it's not in stone. This is a projection of where we're going. And I think we just need to consider it as that. You know, putting away what I hear that has been the struggle is wanting to save money for a consultant's report. That is what reserves are for. You already have savings. We already have $374,000 of savings. So we don't need to be saving more on top of that because, again, we're not going to do disaster work. You know, we're not going to respond to the locusts. So I think just really being mindful of what the purpose of reserves are. We've got that money there, and we've got to use that money, and that money needs to be working for us. So there's nothing wrong dipping into reserves, mid-year budget adjusting, and then replenishing reserves the next year. We need to not treat it as untouchable money. That's where those reports can come from.
So, Commissioner Ramos, are you saying you didn't see the MSR for locusts on the strategic plan?
No, and I am not going to recommend including it.
We'll leave that one off. Okay, so I think thank you for going through that list and for some clarification. I like the idea of doing an in-person calendaring, but I actually think it's probably more efficient to do with the doodle poll online.
Yeah, just one piece on that, and it is fine to do it that way. This is a notice public hearing, so if you can continue it to a date certain, it will prevent the need to renotice this and have staff do it. You don't have to do it that way. It'll just be one extra step for staff to go through the process one more time. So we'll leave that to you all.
Through the chair, if I may make a recommendation, because many of us are already at flood on the 16th.
That's a great idea.
Hold on, I think that's
It's a Tuesday.
that is we have budget meeting in town council. Hold on, let me pull that up. The 16th, we have flood, and then I have budget. By time budget's open, I wouldn't have maybe.
What time does your budget meeting start?
It starts at 10:30, and I got them to move that back a little bit just so I could finish getting back from flood. So I probably wouldn't be able to get back to, if we have it in the supervisor's chamber till 4 on the 16th.
Yeah, I'm at Toro from 7:30 to
Okay.
1600.
I think we're going to opt for the not continuing to a date certain because we could spend all day on this. So given that, can I have your direction of how you want me to continue this?
Simply motion a second to continue it to a special meeting to be decided this month.
I'll make the motion to continue to a meeting to be determined.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you. And thanks for everyone who spent time on that. Dawn. We will, I'm going to suggest we take a quick comfort break, and then we will get to item 8A. Does that work for everyone?
Yep.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, welcome back to the LAFCO meeting, special LAFCO meeting of April 8th. We are going to, do you want us to reopen that agenda item? Item 7B, and we are going to continue discussion about scheduling for a continuation of that item and discussion. So right now I'm looking at my calendar for Thursday the 25th of April or Friday the 26th. Are people, we're okay?
Does that give us 21
We
days?
don't need 21 days if we make the decision of the date certain today.
Got it.
So I'm going to suggest 11 noon or
What date?
1 p.m. Thursday the 25th, anytime from 11 to 4 p.m.
I would have to do 1 o'clock. I have a Zoom from
Okay.
10 to 12.
Okay. So 1 p.m. is our current idea.
I could do that.
I've got to jump in and just comment that, so the LAFCO staff workshop is that week from Wednesday the 24th through Friday the 26th. I am not going, and I believe I can run the meeting without the rest of our staff, but both Dawn and Stephanie are going to the staff
Okay.
workshop.
So not ideal, doable but not ideal. I think I'm going to have a challenge. I'm out of town on the following week, so I'm going to suggest we stick with that Thursday at 1 p.m. if that works for everyone's calendar. Thank you, Brendan.
So
for
can we
being
do
willing.
1:30 or 2, or is 1 p.m.?
Can you
the
do
latest?
later?
Yeah, I'm just in a Zoom from 10 to 12.
Well, let's give you a little time and say 2 p.m.
2
then.
p.m.
Does that work for you? Joelle?
You want to,
Okay. Okay.
so we can probably
Mary, that works for you?
maybe have it here, just because we don't know what the county room is like.
If 2 p.m. works with your team, that would be great.
Okay, so 2 p.m. we'll just plan on Yountville,
Yes, yes.
Sounds good.
April 25th, 2 p.m.
25th, 2 p.m.
If we can do it here, I think that's, yeah, thank you.
That way we don't have to run any cameras, and with only one staff, I think that's going to work a lot better.
Okay, terrific, thank
Hopefully
you.
we're open.
We will go ahead with that. Okay, so then we will continue. Do you want us to revise the motion?
Yeah, so the normal procedure, which you've probably seen elsewhere, is this motion to reconsider process. I don't think you have to go through that if you're all in consent and agree on what you're doing. So just another motion to
Okay, so I'll entertain a
continue it to
motion.
that time and date.
I'll make a motion that we continue the special meeting to a date certain, which is April the 25th at 2 p.m. Do we have to name a location, Gary?
Yes.
And we'll have it in Yountville Town Halls.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. We will move on to the next agenda item, which is item 8A, legislative report and proposed position on bills.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Now, Dawn was planning to present this, and I'll look to Dawn. Are you still okay
Yeah.
doing that?
Yes,
Thank you. Said Dawn's doing
definitely.
double duty today unexpectedly.
All right, so your budget subcommittee is Chair Cottrell and Commissioner Painter, and they met on March 11th. And just to advise the commission that when the legislative committee meets, they look over a list of what are the recommendations for various. First of all, what are the bills that LAFCO feels affect LAFCO? Because as we well know, there's so many bills out there. And then also, what is, they look at LAFCO's suggested position on these things, CSAC, and then Cal Cities. So each one of those are compared as well. The legislative committee did take a look at the legislative policy. They are going to continue to look at that policy to see if they might come back and make suggestions to the commission. In addition, they discussed the legislative platform and felt that it should reflect the strategic plan and the work program, and that those should be included in there. So there again, that would be something that the legislative committee would be meeting again and coming up with possible suggestions to the commission for those. Now, with respect to the proposed legislation, AB 817, this is one that LAFCO is watching. Cal Cities and CSAC are both sponsors of this bill. The committee recommends that the commission take a support position on this. And it's interesting. There were a number of bills that dealt with the changes in the Brown Act. This particular one, and I can certainly understand some of the reasons why Cal Cities and CSAC have sponsored this particular bill, because this one would allow, there is often a difficulty in the public individuals serving on various committees just because of work commitments and family commitments and so forth. So this would allow those kind of appointed committees to be able to meet virtually, is the concept on this one. The next one that was discussed, and the committee recommends that the commission support this one. And this one has to do with indemnification for LAFCO. And that has been a great concern for LAFCOs around the state because they're sort of looking at following what's allowed for planning commissions and so forth, is that kind of indemnification. So there's some tricks on this one just because of the various supporters that we have out there or don't have. CalAFCO is supporting this bill, and it really has a lot to do with LAFCO's had a very traditional indemnification, and I think our legal counsel can speak to this even more so, but LAFCO's traditionally had indemnification clauses in there, and then there was, I believe it was an AG opinion that actually looked the opposite way on this. So LAFCOs are concerned about having these, be able to use indemnification clauses. AB 3277 is also another interesting one. We've not had here in Napa a lot of formation of districts, but this one deals with the exchange of property tax. And basically, if there is a formation of a district, LAFCO has to come in and negotiate and make determinations regarding the exchange of property tax funds. Now, what this addresses is that there are times when there's a district formed and they really have no plans to request a percentage of that property tax funds. So if that were the case and they weren't going after those funds, then this bill would clean up the fact that then the commission wouldn't have to come in and make and be involved in something that's not going to even really happen anyway. And the committee recommends that the commission discuss this bill and consider taking a position on it. CalAFCO does support it and has requested that LAFCO support this bill. And so that's pretty much the presentation here. Thank you, and we do have our members here if you ask questions from them.
Thank you for that rundown. Do people have specific questions? I'll first turn, Beth, do you want to add anything?
No, I think Dawn did a terrific job. Thank you.
I'll just make a few comments. I sit on the LAFCO Ledge Committee, and we meet monthly, and it's a very large committee, and we go through all these bills in quite a bit of detail. So I know there are just a tremendous amount of bills still kind of going through the legislature on the Brown Act, and especially with our virtual meetings. And I think the most compelling argument that I hear over and over is, especially with our more rural northern counties, we consider ourselves a rural northern county. But when you're up in Yolo and Humboldt, you've got to travel great distances, to attend some of these meetings, and talk about our schedules being, difficult to figure out if you can do this and that. You have to factor in weather and travel and all that. So, I think we still haven't really got that right. And this is just kind of a piece, I think, to really incrementally. I know we definitely want to. We all learned so much with Zoom during, the pandemic, and so luckily LAFCO happens to be a 501c3, so we can hold all of our meetings virtually, and attendance is so much better, it's so much more productive. So I still think we're trying to go backwards and we should go forward, but that's an opinion. But I definitely think that we should support this. And then, the indemnification, this has been quite a bit of discussion on the Ledge Committee, and I'm going to hopefully not put Gary on the spot, but because I think Cortese's taken this over for us. We're losing control with LAFCO, but Cortese carries a lot of weight, but still, you never know how things are going to go. Maybe you could give us a little update on San Luis Obispo and how this all came about and why this is pretty critical, I think, to support.
Yeah, happy to. And it is a case. It's a Court of Appeal decision from San Luis Obispo, LAFCO. LAFCOs are creatures of statute. They are not cities and they are not counties. So you don't have what's called the general police power that counties and cities enjoy to pass laws for the general welfare. So you have to look to statute for whatever powers LAFCO has. And the question begins and ends with the statute. And so there's nothing in Cortese Knox Hertzberg that grants LAFCOs the ability to require indemnification. There's obviously provisions in there about fees, and there's provisions in there about how you process applications and the like, but there's no express authority for requiring indemnification in this way. So that's what the court latched onto. They looked at the statute and said there isn't any authority for this, therefore LAFCOs don't have the authority to do it. But the other side of that coin is the legislature could fix this, right? Because they can just adopt a new statute that allows you to do it. And so that's where the push has been. It's been several years in the making. It looks like Mr. Cortese has picked it up, which is great. And if that bill is passed and that becomes statute, then you all would have much clearer authority to require it. We still believe there is authority to require it, at least under some circumstances, and that's why most LAFCOs continue to do it. But there is a little bit of an open question there, and so it looks like the bill is going to close that loop.
And that was another, just to add another point to that, it was really with the big Ledge Committee that we have, San Diego LAFCO probably has gone through like 5 lawsuits this year. SLO is just about bankrupt because they did not have enough money in their reserves to hire attorneys to fight the lawsuit. Just kind of saying, that's what sometimes reserves are for. So it's, it really hasn't happened to us. We had, some contentious issues last year that could have gone, lots of different directions. So sometimes you just never know. So I think it's really an important thing that we kind of keep driving. I know it's a major priority for LAFCO. So those are my
All right.
thoughts.
Thank you for that. And thanks for sitting on that group. I think that's important to get your expertise and that firsthand experience. So thank you for that. So given that the Legislative Subcommittee recommends support of AB 817 and SB 1209, I'm first going to open we don't have to have a public comment, but in case there's anyone out there in the world who wants to comment. Okay, we don't have that. So I will then see if there's a motion for those 2 bills.
I'll make a motion to support the committee's recommendation.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thanks. And then on AB 3277, Do we want to, again, this is something that Cal LAFCO is sponsoring. So, and it makes sense that it's helping LAFCOs to look at the transfer of the property tax. So is there interest in learning more about that or supporting at this point?
I would support watch.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think as a part of our discussion, these bills affect every county, every jurisdiction a little bit differently. I think, we do rely on Cal LAFCO as an organization to take those bigger positions. We didn't really dig in to look at how this may or may not affect us locally, whether it's the county or any of the cities. So I think continuing to watch makes sense in this, because the way I look at this committee is Cal LAFCO does a great job in looking at some of those big picture items. If we're going to take a position on something like this, I think we really need to think about how it might impact us locally, and we don't have that information today. So let's watch it.
Yeah, I would agree. Okay, so we will, I'll just take that as consensus, and then thank you for that report. And we will move on to item number 9, Executive Office.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. I will try to be brief since we're crunched for time here, but I do want to share that this week I will be attending a water consolidation discussion meeting with other LAFCOs, as well as a researcher with UC Berkeley. They produced a very in my opinion, excellent report on water system consolidations throughout the state, and they want to follow up on that. So they're coming straight to the source. LAFCOs, I will be a part of that. If there's anything to report out, I will do that at the next meeting. Also, this Thursday, many of you will be at the Napa County League of Governments meeting. I plan to attend that as well. And I've spoken with Jason Hawley, City of American Canyon City Manager, about possibly getting the LAFCO Fire and EMS MSR as a topic to share at a future NICLOG meeting. So he is open to that, perhaps for the following meeting, which would be in, I believe, August or thereabouts. In addition, next Monday, I will be attending the Napa Valley Unified School District groundbreaking for their Vintage High School Farm project, which was an exciting project we were a part of. We approved several pieces of that at the December 2023 meeting. Really great concept there. As mentioned earlier, we have the Cal LAFCO staff workshop coming up in April 24th through 26th, with 2 staff attending. I'll be staying behind, and so I can run that special meeting that we scheduled. Just confirming again, that special meeting will be Thursday, April 25th, 2 p.m. here at Town of Yountville. Last comment for now, staff is keeping busy with a handful of annexation applications at various stages. Just because the commission approves an annexation at a public meeting does not mean the process ends there. There's quite a bit more paperwork required, follow-up oftentimes with applicants to get some additional items, can sometimes take longer than expected. And so quite a bit going on behind the scenes that you've done your part on some of those, but we're still going. Well, I'll make one final comment that the commission had given me direction a while back. Actually, thank you to Commissioner Ramos for the idea that I send quarterly emails just giving you a heads up on some of this behind the scenes activity. I would like to get some feedback on if those are helpful, if I shall continue, or if you prefer these updates be provided during executive officer reports such as this one. I don't know if legal counsel, if that is allowed, if they can provide feedback now, or how we do that, but it would be very helpful.
I think a brief response is allowed as agendized under this.
I like what you're doing.
I didn't hear that.
Feedback on Brendan's
I like what he had, the quarterly.
quarterly report.
Okay, so written reports is your preference versus verbal?
It's not a preference. I just like to have something that kind of summarizes on a regular basis, because what ends up happening at these meetings is the most recent or the biggest end up getting the airtime, And so I think that the written is an opportunity to kind of fill in the gaps. Certainly doesn't preclude an oral report.
Yeah, I'm very flexible. Sometimes it takes longer to write something down versus giving it verbally, and sometimes it's the opposite. So I would just leave it up to staff how they want to do it.
Happy to continue with the emails. I'm overdue on this one. You'll get one soon. I should have sent it by now, but it'll come this week.
Sounds great. I actually think those will become a helpful record for you too, to look back and say, what did the spring of 2024 look like as opposed to the winter of 2029? So thank you for that. And also I just wanted to say thank you for attending that workshop on water consolidation. I think that will be interesting and helpful for us to get that report when you come back too. So thank you. So with that, next item is agenda item number 10, commissioner comments or requests for future agenda items. Anything at this point? Joelle.
Thank you. I had asked staff to explain to me why alternates were not sitting in on the closed sessions, because I was concerned that if I had to sit in on a closed session regarding personnel items that maybe have taken place over several sessions, I wouldn't have the background and wouldn't know what had been happening. And so that led me down a path, and we started digging in a little bit. It was an AG opinion, apparently, many years ago, and apparently most LAFCOs don't follow it. So I just wanted to put it out there for maybe a future agenda item or request to staff to talk more to Cal LAFCO about that, to see if it's time to give it a relook, because most LAFCOs aren't following it, and they are, jeopardizing themselves doing that. But at the same time, I understand why they are, because it makes practical sense. So I just wanted to throw that out there as maybe potentially something to talk about or to talk to Cal LAFCO about.
Great, thank you. So I think we can get that on a future agenda. That would be terrific. And then I wanted to
And I've already sent an email to Cal LAFCO with the opinion, and we're going to be working we have an attorney too, so.
Great. And I was just going to add also as a request for a future agenda item, I think based on our previous conversation this morning about budgets and independence, I would love to have a specific agenda item that kind of sets out what staff's concerns are, and in terms of where you really see how independence helps us, kind of at a line by line or at a function by function, so that when we're talking about the budget and also the path forward, we understand what are the pieces that are where you think that we can find improvements by moving toward independence. I think that would help this whole conversation too. So with that.
Yeah. I'd like us to examine or to really come to agreement. For me, independence is independence. There's no gray shades in between. It doesn't mean that we can't contract with the county for anything. If we go independent, we get to choose who we work with and who we hire. So to me, there can't be any gray shades. There's no partial. Yes, well, we're independent. We choose to contract with the county. That's our choice. So I just like to have some clarity there, and so we can call it what it is and what we're doing, and we know what we're doing.
Can I just add briefly to that? I know we're running late. I think that's a great topic for a future meeting. And any information you can give us on LAFCOs that are running independently, so that we can independently look at their websites, look at their budgets, look at how they do things, would be really helpful for me to understand the difference between the world we operate in versus what a fully independent LAFCO does.
Great, thank you. And it sounds like all those requests could get rolled into a single agenda item. So,
and I would just suggest that you kind of start one of the very first things we did a few years ago. We had county council, and we made a decision to take the first step and get an independent council who actually has LAFCO experience with other LAFCOs. So don't leave that out, because we already have taken one important step.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to item 11 11, closed session. Gary, I'll turn it over to you to.
Yes, Madam Chair and Commissioners, there's one closed session item on your agenda this afternoon. And that is a conference with legal counsel for anticipated litigation. This is based on facts and circumstances that the commission believes are not yet known to a potential plaintiff.